Today we're going to be working on one of my favorite shotguns, the Browning Auto 5. This is an excellent gun, very well made. Discontinued, as you all know, here back not too long ago, but there's still about probably nearly 3 million of them out there. It's one of the finest guns ever made. All machine parts. It's really no comparison to the modern guns that you'll find out there nowadays. One of my favorites. This is a Sweet 16 I just purchased this past week. We're going to be restoring this gun back to like factory new. It's not really bad, but they sell for me much better if they're restored. There again, we've talked about this restored thing. A restored gun that's been done by the wrong guy is worth virtually about nothing. But when they're done and done correctly, done right to where they look factory new again, it brings the value right back. These are my best sellers. Sweet 16s, I just can't hardly keep enough of them in stock. Sometimes we get a little carried away on them and put fancy wood on them. And sometimes when they need to have the engraving touched up, we go a little extra on that and kind of, make it a little better. These guns were engraved at the factory, and they were just hammered out one after another. My friend Angelo B said that when he started training at Browning to be an engraver, they started him engraving trigger guards on A5s, and that's all he did, was hundreds and hundreds of trigger guards to start on A5s. And then pretty soon he went to A5s. Of course, we know Angelo nowadays is really, from there he graduated up and does the high grade stuff. But this is what he trained on, was the Browning Auto 5. Excuse me. So I found that interesting when he told me how he started off doing the trigger guard on A5s. That was his, that taught him a little bit about engraving in the beginning. So this gun we're going to pull down and restore, and while we're doing all of that, we're going to also talk about some of the little glitches and bugs and little problems that these guns have. They don't have many issues. There's a few little things that will have to be repaired on occasion. I guess the biggest thing is most of them that have been out there a while all need new springs, action springs, recoil springs, extractor springs, that sort of thing. On occasion there'll be another part that's worn or broken that we might replace, but for the most part they hold up rather well. I doubt that this gun is going to need much, but we're going to get into it and tear it down. And while we do that, we're going to talk about some of the more advanced things that we do on these shotguns. These will be things you won't be able to do at home, but I'll show you how we do it here, because it takes special tooling and equipment to do it. So we'll go ahead and commence to tear this down and get into it and see what we can discover. I haven't been into it yet, so I really don't know anything about it, but we'll get into it and see what it looks like internally. Alright, first thing I've got to do on this gun is remove the magazine cap. I was just tinkering with it here a minute ago, and it's really tight. And if there's one, there's a million of these magazine caps out there. The guys that put channel locks on and vice grips and whoever knows what to take those magazine caps off. And the reason they're on there really torqued on tight, a lot of guys have been told that these forums crack because the caps aren't on tight enough. That's not really true. If you tighten this cap down hand tight, it's tight enough. It has nothing to do with the cracking of the forum. We'll talk about these cracked forums in a little bit. So anyway, here in the shop, we have made up out of a pair of vice grips. And if you guys are going to be taking a lot of these apart, you need to make a pair of these up. Go buy a cheap pair of vice grips that are concave and glue some leather shims in there to protect that cap. And then when you get those tight caps in, which happens all the time, you can get that on there and get a hold of it without marring it and tearing it all up, because these Belgian made caps are getting to be a little hard to find. There's plenty of Japanese models out there, but not much in the way of Belgian caps. Let me get this off of here, get this barrel out of the way. While we have this barrel off, let's talk about it a little bit. This is a Sweet 16 barrel, so it has the holes drilled in it. Of course, the idea in that was to keep it cut down on weight a little bit. When they went from the standard 16s to the Sweet 16s, they did things to lighten this barrel, a little thinner on the wall thickness in the metal. They drilled some holes to make it a little lighter. Now, the barrel extension on a Browning Auto 5, on a rare occasion, will crack through the where the locking block goes through and locks into it. On occasion, they will crack. I've seen one or two in my lifetime that actually broke the whole back end of the extension off. All right, on these barrel extensions, they're threaded onto the barrel. This is your barrel extension. And they're very, very tight. If one is cracked or broken, you're going to really need serious stuff to get it off and replace it. You probably won't have the equipment. At Browning, we had a special wrench that slipped over the extension end. Big, long, heavy, massive thing. And this would be put in a vise, barrel vise, blocks that are shaped to the barrel. And then the broken extension could be removed and the new one put back on. But there again, they're really, really tight. So that's another one of those things we talked about. Yeah, you won't be able to do that at home. You'll need me or Browning or someone if you have a cracked or broken extension. This is your ejector. This is a sliding ejector in this gun. We might do a video later on how to modify a short chambered 16 gauge to 2 3/4. That'd be an interesting video. And when you do modify them, they have a fixed ejector when you have to put a sliding ejector like this in. But that's for another day. So let's get into our receiver. Now, I've taken this gun off. The first thing I see is the magazine tube is very, very dry. This gun probably would have problems ejecting. I get a lot of calls like just every week, guys telling me their A5 doesn't eject, doesn't feed, doesn't do. I will tell them the first thing before you send anything to me is get a couple drops of motor oil and drop it right underneath this bronze piece, under this friction ring. Then go try your gun. More than likely you can fix it yourself. A lot of guys have it in their mind that this magazine tube should be dry. That's not so at all. You have to have a couple drops. And I'm not talking about Remington oil or Browning oil or gun oil. I'm talking about some motor oil or something that really has some slickerness to it. Now, go ahead and remove this. Oftentimes I get these in, they'll be missing one of the rings. This spring right here is one we almost always replace. This is your recoil spring. Once these collapse on you, you'll get a lot more recoil, and just virtually any gun that that's of this age, that needs to be replaced. That's your recoil spring. Your bronze piece and your friction ring here. Oftentimes I get these guns in, they're missing this steel friction ring, so we have to replace those. And sometimes we have to replace these bronze friction rings, bronze pieces, because they get worn and they develop problems. We'll go ahead and remove the stock on this gun. There again, screwdrivers in the shop here. We make all these from scratch. Very fine slots on a Browning Auto 5 or Superposed or whatever Browning you're working on. They have pretty fine slots. So first off, we're going to start by removing the lock screw. A lot of guys, when they take these apart, they take the mainspring screw out. They think that holds the stock on. Once they pop that out of there, they got real problems. Then you have to dismantle it and put it back in. Now, I have a couple different screwdrivers on my bench that I use to do specific things, and this is my favorite screwdriver for removing tang screws, your stock retaining screw. On Japanese guns, some of them, this screw will be so tight that you'll have to get an impact driver. At Browning, we had a special machine that was made up with a large wheel on it that you could crank it down and take that screw out, because I don't know why they're so tight or who puts them on that tight, but boy, they're tight. So I usually get them out with an impact driver. I destroy the screw, but that's okay, I can replace that. But to remove these stocks now, I'll be out of camera range here when I probably take this stock off, but you just thump the back of this receiver on the bench and hold on to the stock. I did that over here out of sight, but that's the way you remove those stocks. So stock, we can get out of the way now. So now we're going to dismantle this receiver. Drop your bolt. Let's go ahead and remove first. Let's remove the action spring. This is another spring you need to replace. When you break these guns down, these older guns that have been around for a few years, you're going to always need to replace this action spring. These two springs right here, very important. You need to replace those in your gun. It'll cut down on recoil. It'll save damaging the receiver. When these recoil springs especially get really collapsed and you shoot heavy rounds in it, don't have it set properly, I've actually seen them where it'll beat out the back of the receiver. And when it's pounding on that receiver, I guarantee you it's pounding on your shoulder too as you shoot it, because that's a lot of recoil. Sometimes I get them in and you'll see dimples back on the back of this to where you can see that the rings have not been set properly. So important that the rings be set properly. We talked about that before. We'll talk about it again. When you're shooting heavy loads, remember your steel ring goes on first with the bevel up. Slide it on, bevel up. Your bronze ring here goes on next, bevel up. Now that gun now is set for heavy loads when you slide that on. Now, for light loads, take this off. You can put it in your pocket where you'll lose it, or you can slide your recoil spring off and turn it over with the flat part up, and slide that to the bottom of your magazine tube, and put your spring back on, then just put on your bronze piece, bevel up, always bevel up, slide that on. Then that gun will be set up for light loads, and that's what you need to remember on that. Let's go ahead and remove this, remove that. We'll go ahead and break down the receiver. There again, we make our screwdrivers around here. We buy the stock from the handles from Brownells. I like big handles where you can really get a lot of torque on. Then we buy our screwdriver stock from Brownells and make our own screwdrivers, because you have to do that to get the fine slots you need. You just can't use a mechanic screwdriver on these guns. Then we commence to break it down. Our magazine cutoff screw, we'll take that out. Our magazine cutoff spring. Let's go ahead and get out our lock screws. When we go through these guns and restore them, a lot of times these screws are burred up, and we'll replace them, or we will just remove the burrs on some of them that aren't burred too badly. But remember, burrs are the gunsmith's curse. You don't want burrs on screws. That's really amateur stuff. You don't want anything like that. We're trying to make these guns look new again, and in so doing, you don't want any burrs on any screws anywhere. So we're going to take the trigger plate screws out and back those out. I keep around my bench a pair of end cutters. I use those a lot for just pulling out screws. Now we're down to our trigger plate, our trigger assembly. This is the new style, what we call a deep tang. A shallow tang. Here's a shallow tang. When we talk about deep tangs and shallow tangs, the early guns had what we call a shallow tang trigger guard. What we're referring to in the shallow tang is this thickness right here, the guard at the rear. This is an early shallow tang. When somebody says, yeah, you've got an early shallow tang stock, that's what they're referring to. Now, this gun is a later model. This has what we call the deep tang. It's a little thicker in through here. Now, the stocks will swap back and forth. You have to glue shims in or remove excess wood. This is a newer style gun. Has the carrier spring mounted in the trigger plate. The early models had the carrier spring, a couple pins in the receiver, had it mounted in the receiver. The early models also, a lot of them had the one-piece carriers. Here's a one-piece carrier. You can change these out and put a split carrier, or they call it the speed load system in. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But here's our trigger plate. It's out. Let's go ahead and remove our carrier spring. This is your safety sear. Now, on occasion, I've seen these pins back out or break off that whole safety sear. Pretty rare. You won't see that very often. Just pull down the spring and plunger, remove those, and your safety sear comes right out. Now we're going to remove the hammer, take the safety off, drop the hammer, and then to take the hammer out, of course. Now you need bench blocks a lot. It helps a lot taking these apart and get it on a bench block where you can kind of dry things out. Sometimes these pins are a little tight. Usually they're not. Usually they're very loose. Took her hammer out. The early guns had hammers that didn't have these holes in it. They put those holes are in that hammer to cut down on weight. And while we're talking about the early models, the standard 16s, the difference between those receivers and this Sweet 16 is the Sweet 16s. I don't know if it'll show up on camera much, but they've made some cuts in here to remove excess metal. There's some cuts, right? You won't they may not show up much, but they've taken and removed some of that excess metal to cut down on weight. The early standards 16s, you won't see these cuts in there. When they made the Sweet 16, the whole idea was to cut down on weight. Let's go ahead and remove the carrier. That's the reason I like the big handles on screwdrivers. That's a real tight lock screw there. With a big handle, I can get a lot of torque on it. I can get that thing out of there. Now, if these carrier screws are fairly loose, you can use the same screwdriver, and these are pretty loose. Sometimes they're tight, and if so, you need another screwdriver with a fine slot to take those out so you don't burn them. These weren't very tight. And guys say, well, when I go to put these carrier screws in, how do I know which one is the left and which one's the right? You don't. Just remember this: when you go to put one in, you got a 50-50 chance of getting it right. You'll know by the way the cutout in the screw lines up. So they're not marked left or right. You figure that out when you put them together. Now, let's get our bolt assembly out. To do so, we have a pin, and this is a cutout in the receiver here. This cutout is for this pin, and this hole over here is so you can drive that pin out from left to right. So this pin that we're talking about, it's a locking block latch pin. And let's slide it back, and you slide it back and line it up with that slot. Turn it over carefully, grab your punch, and tap it out. And don't drive your punch down too deep where you flare out the hole. Just go deep enough. And when you get it out far enough, it'll just pull out. Then, once you've done that, your locking block latch comes out, your locking block latch spring. Locking block latches wear on the end here. We'll talk about that later. You can replace those once in a while. I rarely do. They just don't seem to need that much replacement. Now, to take your breech bolt out, then once you got your locking block latch out, lift up your link and slide it all forward. Your breech bolt will come right out, and there's your operating handle. Now, I've got this breech bolt out. We're going to talk about this a little bit while I have it here in front of me. This is there again, it's a Sweet 16. There's the one thing about Browning, when they would have a particular part in a gun that was a weakness in them, that would break or bend or wouldn't hold up well, Browning would always replace those and modify them to make things better, to where they would last longer and hold up better, and they didn't have those problems. Now, while I've got this out, this link, on occasion, rarely, I've seen them crack and break, but that just doesn't happen very often. What usually happens on these older model guns, the standard 16s and all, I think we've talked about this before, they have what we call the narrow rail locking block. And here's one right here. I brought a sample down. This is out of a 12 gauge gun. This is a early breech bolt, and this has what we call a narrow rail on the locking block. The locking block rotates into the breech block here, and that's what locks into your barrel extension and locks the gun, puts it in the battery position. Here's what breaks on these. This was a little weakness in the early guns. This narrow rail locking block, this half moon shape, will break off on these. That's common. They do it a lot. Now, the only fix for that, if you have one, there's a few of these old narrow rail locking blocks around. If you don't shoot the gun a lot, you can put one in that probably lasts you pretty near forever. If you got one you're going to use a lot, you need to go to the newer style. Now, here's a new style. It's wider. This particular half moon shape, the guide here, it's wider on this new style. Here's the old style, narrow. Now, these these are going to break off. These on occasion, these the rail. Now, so Browning modified that. They discontinued this narrow rail, and they went to the wider rail. And now, if you're going to change and go to this new style locking block, you're going to have to also change your breech bolt, of course. And it gets a little pricey, but that's the best way to do it. Now, here's kind of a little, here's kind of what happened when they made they cut out the rail a little deeper in the breech bolt. Now, sometimes on occasion the top of the breech bolt will break out. Now here's one I've got here. Instead of the rail breaking off, it might break out the top of the bolt. So when they cut it a little wider, it tended to maybe weaken that breech block a little bit. I don't see that much. It's pretty rare, but on occasion you'll see it. So here's one here where the top of the bolt is broken out on the wider rail. So that's just something to be looking for. But this one here looks good. You can tell when they're bad and when they're good. You just kind of rotate in there. You can see that nothing's broke. The top of the bolt's not cracked. Check for cracks. This one's good. Extractor springs, I suggest replacing those sometimes. Some of the early extractors were a little weak, and so Browning changed the extractors to a newer style extractor, all in efforts to beef things up so things don't break as much. So this is pretty good. It's just dirty. It's been used a lot. This gun has what I prefer. It has roll pins that hold in the carrier latch and your magazine cutoff and all those. I like roll pins better. A lot of guys think it's kind of chintzy. It's not. The early ones had screws. Well, the problem with those I've had them where I couldn't get the screws out. They rust in and they're terrible. These I can get out every time. The ones with screws had a blind hole, and you just had to fight those things to get them out if they were rusted in. These, of course, the hole goes clear through the other end of the receiver, so you can always get them out. And they work well. You don't have any problem with these roll pins. They don't go bad. They last forever. You need a little longer punch to get in there and drive them out. Go ahead and drive out these roll pins and remove your cartridge stop and your magazine cut off and get those pins out there. Now this receiver is broke down completely. Okay, everything's out. Now you have a magazine spring retainer. This one's metal. The later models had plastic. Go over and hook that on a nail that you've got driven into your bench. You kind of put it in there and just pop it out. I'll take that out later. So our receiver is stripped down completely and ready to go. Let's see here. I didn't quite get all my trigger plate apart. Let's talk about that. Let's go ahead. Like I say, some guys think that this screw right here, this is your mainspring screw. They take that out thinking it is going to remove the stock. That's not so. Let's go ahead and take this mainspring out and remove that. There's a little small pin that holds this. This is your trigger return spring and your safety spring. Go ahead and tap that out. I tap it a little bit and kind of grab it with my trusty indicators, pulled out the rest of it. Then we have removed those items. Now let's go ahead and take out our trigger pin here. Get the trigger out. Then our trigger plate will be torn down completely. Be careful, don't lose your little detent ball there. They want to roll out and get lost. This gun is numbered on the guard, so when I blew it, I won't have any trouble finding where that gun goes. So we're all torn down, we're ready to blue. We're going to step over to a vise here in a little bit. I'm going to show you something that happens on occasion. On occasion, and I don't see many of them, the magazine tubes can break on them. They break right at the receiver where the threads are. It weakens it a little bit. That's rare. It rarely ever happens. I've seen, I don't know, half a dozen of them, 40 years or so. The bad thing about when these things break, everything forward of this receiver kind of goes shooting out with this recoil spring behind it, a lot of pressure. It goes, everything forward of that receiver goes shooting out into the field. And if you're unlucky enough to be in a duck blind, it all shoots out into the lake. Then you're standing there holding the back half of your gun, and everything from your receiver forward's gone. I've had guys tell me they had to get out in the lake and fish around and dig around with their foot and all till they found the barrel and the front part of their gun. So that's a bad place for that spring to this magazine tube to break. They rarely break. Now, on occasion you'll get one where the threads are boogered up or it's all chewed up on the end and you need to replace it. So we're going to step over the vise a little bit and show you how to remove one of these. These things are real tight. They're really, really tight. You need some special equipment to get them off. Now this special equipment you take these off with, it's not anything like you would think. At Browning, we use some really effective tools for removing those. I'm going to get what I need here, show you how we did it before we get to the vise. This is what, when I was at Browning back in the 70s, this particular block of wood right here, it's a homemade block made out of oak and reinforced. This goes, that's your wrench that you put on the receiver. That's what takes that receiver off. Now and then we would make these blocks out of oak, and we would bore them out so they're a real tight fit, close fit. And those go around your magazine tube. And that right there in the vise and held tight that'll take the most stubborn magazine tube out you can come across. Now, the critical thing on this, you got to remember when you go to remove this magazine tube and you put it in this block here, the first thing you got to do is get you an old a barrel extension and slide it in to the receiver to keep from crushing that receiver. And then we'll go to the vise a little bit and we'll show you that. Now, these things are tight. You're not going to be able to get them off at home. There's really no reason to take them off. We take a lot of them off in the shop here because we have a lot of engraving done on these receivers, and our engraver doesn't like, he puts it in a little vise that swivels. This tube gets in his way, so we always remove that magazine tube for him before we send them out for engraving. And we send a lot of these out for engraving because a lot of them are rough and they lose the engraving. And we got a really great engraver in the area that puts all that engraving back on. We do bunches of them every year. All right, we're at the vise. We're going to remove a magazine tube. Show you guys how to do that. This is something, as they say, don't try it at home. You won't be able to try it at home most likely because you won't be able to unless you really build the right tools. Now, here's my homemade barrel block for my magazine tube. I'm going to clamp that on the magazine tube. Here's one. Here's an early tube that was made at Browning probably 40 years ago. This is what they were using then. I haven't been down there lately. I assume they probably still use the same thing. This is just an oak block. They were a little fancier down there. They milled some slots in this block and put the bolts through it. They got a couple pins in it here, and those pins are to keep it from dropping down in the vise. Some of those guys down there had more time to spend on this stuff than they needed to, but that's okay. This is a 16 gauge block. We won't be using that today. We're going to use my homemade block. Now, we're going to start here. Here's the important critical thing on removing magazine tube. You need, because these things are tight, you need an old barrel extension. Now this is a 12 gauge receiver I'm salvaging out for parts. I'm salvaging this magazine tube, and I'll tell you why. I try to save all these early Belgium tubes that I can. I'll tell you why I do that in a minute. First off, you want to slide your barrel extension into the receiver. That's to keep from crushing that receiver. If you don't have that, these receivers are real thin up in the top area here. Boy, you'll mess them all up if you don't have the extension in there. Now, I'm going to slide this into there again, my homemade action block here. This is just a piece of oak, milled out with a hole cut in it. I've reinforced it with a couple bolts here. I've used this thing hundreds of times to remove magazine tubes, and it keeps on working. You wear it out, we'll make a new one. So we slide it in. Now we're going to clamp on. We're going to put our barrel, our magazine blocks out on here. Now I have a big vise here I use in the shop for this. And then I tighten it down. Now, sometimes it doesn't hurt if you put a little rosin in this vise to make it grip that tube better. I rarely have to do that. I've not had this tube off ever. This isn't one of my usual staged Hollywood things. This is from scratch. I don't know what this is going to do, how tight it's going to be. But just put it in, tighten it down. Yeah, nice and tight. Then first thing I do is I try to take it off. Sometimes they're not that tight. Let's see what this one does. That one won't come off like that. So I'll tighten it down a little bit more. Now I have Another specialty tool here we use in the shop is called a big piece of pipe. And what we do, we give this thing a shock. You see how this thing's kind of beat up here a little bit? That's from this specialty pipe tool here. And that shock, 99% of the time, will break that magazine tube loose. Let's see what it does. It did it. That specialty tool up. All right, there we go. You need that shock. It's kind of like an impact driver to take out tight screws. There we go. That tube was tight. They always are. On a rare occasion they're loose, but they're usually tight. I'm going to go ahead and spin this off. Alright. You won't be able to see me over here, but I'll get this block out of the way here in a little bit. I'm just unthreading this receiver. I can go ahead and pull all this off. These are fine threads. They're pretty long-winded. It takes a while to get them off. There we go. We're off. We can take out our barrel extension piece now. And because I've had that in there, my receiver is not going to be deformed at all because that protected it. So let's get this off of here. Now, here's my magazine tube. And when we put these back on, we put them on the same way. We put it on and we get that pipe and we give it a hard whack and it cinches it up tight. Then you got to check and make sure your hole is in alignment for your magazine cutoff screw. Now, this is a Belgium made magazine tube. Now here's kind of the reason I keep a lot of these. I salvage them wherever I can. As far as extra parts for A5s, I mean, when they made 3 million of them out there, we're not likely going to run out of parts in your lifetime or mine. I buy a lot of guns and just salvage them for parts. Now, I have here in my left hand a magazine tube. This is a brand new Japanese made tube. Now, these are fine and dandy. They're great tubes. And let me say something about these Japanese made parts. There's nothing wrong with them all. They're excellent, excellent parts. They work very well. A lot of guys say, I don't want no Japanese parts in my Belgium gun. I put them in all the time. They don't know the difference. They're fine. But these tubes, there's something about them. The threads on them are just a little tighter. I'm having a special tap made up to go in and clean these threads up a little bit so I can use the Japanese tubes. Now, when we talked earlier about these magazine tubes breaking, which they do, when they break off, you've got a piece of tube left down in your receiver. Well, that's a problem. The way I get them out, I've got a chisel and I split that ring. The piece of magazine tube, I'll take that chisel and go in there and chisel it out, chisel out that piece, get it split, then I'll get a screwdriver or whatever I need and I'll pry that thing and pop it out. Now, here's the issue with all that. When you do that, you're going to mess your threads up a little bit. Let me step over here and grab something I've got. Now, here's what you don't have at home, and I do. When you mess those threads up, here's a special made tap for tapping out threads. This is a 12-gauge tap. You have to have these special made. There's machine shops, supply places that will make these for you. This is a tap that will go in. Once I boogered up those threads, I can put my tap in there and I can clean those threads up. And I can clean up that receiver and then put in my new magazine tube. So that tool right there is another one of those tools that you're not going to have at home. So if you go to take a split tube out, you got to really be careful of your threads. And you're going to still get into them a little bit. You just can't help it. But if you have this tap, this even has a guide on it. You can go in there and run that in there and clean up those threads and you're back in business again. So this is another one of those things that I'm showing you basically just for entertainment purposes. It's hard. It'll be hard for you to remove a magazine tube at home, and you're just not going to have to. You don't need to remove magazine tubes. There's really no reason ever to do it unless one is really, sometimes they'll really chew them up, beat them up out on the end out here. Or if you have a broken one, then you got to replace it. But I'm just showing you kind of how what tools it takes to remove these tubes. And as you can see, there's nothing special about them. They're just homemade blocks and tools that we use to do that. But that's how we do that. So we're going to step over to my vise and I'm going to show you another little the issue that these guns have, that I'll show you how we take care of that. Okay, I want to talk a little more about my Sweet 16 that I'm working on here today. This particular gun has the action tube on it, and it's all in one piece, and it's all there, and it's not broken. I want to tell you something about these action tubes. This is a common thing for these things to break. I've got this old 12 gauge receiver. This one I just robbed the magazine tube off of here. And I want to talk to you about these action tubes. You'll get these things on occasion where these action tubes will break off. Now the reason they break, the early action tubes on the old standard 12, standard 16s were threaded. Here's one here. These are kind of rare and hard to find, but a guy brought some in the other day and I bought them from him, even though I probably won't use them because they don't hold up well. See, it's like anything else. When they thread something, it has a tendency to weaken things. It has a tendency to weaken, and threaded action tubes have a tendency to break off. That's common, very common. I get lots and lots of them in a broken action tube. We replace a lot of them. This particular 12 gauge gun here has the later model, newer style tube, and for some reason it's loose. I was able just to pull it out today. The solder was not holding well. This is the new style tube. As you can see, it's not threaded. And now, of course, if you have an older gun that's got threads in the receiver, you need to get those threads out of there. You need to bore it out and silver solder in this new style tube, which will last a whole lot longer. It's rare that they ever break. It's just a modification that Browning made, like we talked about. If there was a weakness in a gun, they would correct it. And so they corrected they took those old threaded action tubes and got rid of those. Went to the new sweat-in type that you silver solder in. Now, before you can put this in your receiver, I don't really have one here to do today, but I'll talk to you about it, tell you about it, tell you how we do it. We just chuck up on our receiver, and here's a special reamer that we've had made up. Brownell one time even sold these. I don't think they do anymore. They probably didn't get much call for them. So we have to have them made up special. Anyway, we'll just chuck up on this, and we'll run this boring tool into this receiver. And what we're doing is we're boring out the threads. We will do that, remove those threads, then we'll put flux on our new tube, our new style non-threaded tube, put it in there, and silver solder it in. And then you've got a good action tube that'll last forever, and it's most likely never going to break again. We won't do that today, but that's how it's done anyway. It's just interesting that you know how it's done. The Browning Company is great about that. If they had something that just wasn't quite right and was giving some problems, they would correct it. They didn't leave it that way. So that's how we do that. Now, we're going to be doing something else here. What we see oft times on these old guns, the stocks will be loose on them. The thing that, of course, as we talked about, what holds this stock on this gun is a screw that goes into the stock here. It doesn't have a draw bolt in it like a lot of guns do that draws that receiver up tight. This is what holds that stock to the receiver. Well, some of these old guns get a little dry rotty, and just from being used over the years, this hole will egg shape on them, and then the stock hammers back and forth and the stocks get loose. I tighten like hundreds of these things every year that come in with loose stocks. This particular one here, my little 16 we're messing with here, the stock's tight on it, but I'll show you how we do it anyway. How we take care of a loose stock on an 85. Now, this particular gun, I don't know why I found this stock up on the shelf. It's already been drilled out. We drill this out with a 3/8 inch drill. I may drill a little more. I don't think it's been drilled enough. What we do, here's an important thing on this. If you're not careful when you drill this stock, you don't stop that drill from going all the way through, it'll go through and it'll hit the other side of your stock here and put a big gouge in it. So here's the important thing on that. Just get you a screwdriver or something, put it down in the action tube hole of that stock. What that's going to do is stop your drill. Then you just drill this hole out with a 3/8 inch drill. Kind of like that. See, with that in there, I go down and hit the screwdriver. I don't go through and gouge my stock. Now, we went to Lowe's or Home Depot and we bought these oak wooden plugs, 3/8 inch plugs. And we have drilled that hole out and put some super glue on it. That's all you need. Put that plug in that stock. Tap it in. I use super glue because it sets up fast and I don't have time to sit around waiting on some other epoxies to dry. And so I put it in with super glue. Well, I give that just a little bit to dry, and then I take a chisel, like so, and I'm going to chisel off this excess plug here. And it doesn't take that super glue long to set it up. It's probably pretty close to being there now. So let's get rid of this excess plug. I'll do that by just chiseling it off. That plug's not set up just quite yet. Well, we're not too worried about that. I normally let them sit about 5 minutes or so, but being we're trying to keep this video going here, we're going to go ahead and do this. Now, all right, now we plug that hole. Now, if you think that you're going to be able to take your drill bit and put it in this screwdriver, or not screwdriver, but this drill, and if you think you're going to be able to go in there and drill that hole and it's going to come out just right, you are just kind of kidding yourself. You're never going to get that thing straight. Now, Browning's got little fancier tools down there that they use to. They've got a regular machine set up to where it guides this your drill for drilling this hole. Now we've made this thing up. This is an old back half of an A5 receiver, and we have welded onto it a guide. Of course, this guide is set at the right angle to where when I go drilling, it's going to drill that hole just perfect. So let's do it. So we slide this up on. Just butt it up there tight. Then we drill it. And with this guide on here, it's going to guide me, and I'm going to get that hole to probably be just about perfect. So I'll do this. I'm drilling that piece of oak plug. There I am, I'm all the way through. I think I am. No, I'm not quite all the way through. My drill slipped down in my machine here. Tighten it up a little bit. Let's go drilling again. Needs to go all the way down. I felt like I went through that time. Let's look. Yep, light in the other end. Now, this particular drill that I've got in this guide here is a little undersized, so I had to go back with a little larger drill. There again, get your protector in there. Put that something in there so you don't drill into the other end of your stock. I'll go in now and I'll make that hole a little bigger. Now, here's how you tighten these stocks onto these receivers. This one normally would have a, well, let's put it on. This has got the action tube that's kind of coming out for some reason. You'll slide this is your receiver from your gun. And you'll slide that receiver up on to that stock. I don't know if this one fits. I don't know if it's ever been fit to it. Yeah, it's going to work. Now, this hole has been set up to where it's drilling this back a little to the rear of the stock. And it's left me some excess wood at the front of the hole. That's what we want, because you won't be able to, you want to make this thing go on really tight. And this is your retaining screw here. It's going to go in there. Well, it won't go. Now, you can pull that out and use a rat tail file and kind of mess around. We have a special reamer we've made up that goes down in that hole, and it got a little guide out on the end here. What we're going to do is put that in. This makes tightening stocks really quick and easy. And we'll run this reamer in, and what that's doing is cleaning out that excess wood that's in that hole. There it is right there, excess wood. Now, when I go to put my screw in now, it's going to go in really, really tight. It's going to draw this receiver up tight into the wood, and that's what you want. So it's a quick and simple fix, and we won't worry about putting this on. But that screw, it's going in now. It's threading in, and it's going in tight. It's going in really hard, and that's good. That's what you want. That way, it's going to really pull that receiver into that stock really tight. And that's how you tighten those loose stocks on an A5. You You'll see them on occasion with a gap in between that receiver and that wood. That's because the hole is pounded out in its egg shape. That's the simple fix for it right there. There again, you got to have the right tools and equipment to do it. And if you do have those tools and the right reamers and what have you, it's a quick and simple and easy fix. So we tighten dozens of these things every month. So it's a quick and simple thing if you got the right tools. It's like anything else, you got to have the right tools for the job. So that's how we tighten the loose stock. Well, I want to show you something we made up in the shop the other day. It's just kind of good for instructional purposes and something that you might find of interest. We made a cutaway of a Browning Auto 5 and got it back in the milling machine and made a bunch of cuts in it where you could kind of get in and see how certain things work. I've slipped the barrel into it. We got some dummy rounds in here. Here's your magazine. Here's your magazine follower, see, and you know, we cut out, here's your magazine spring. We cut the form in half and what have you. Kind of gives you an idea how the A5 works. It's a long recoil system. When the gun is fired, of course, this barrel and all comes to the rear. Now, what stops this bolt, the travel at the rear, is the carrier dog. That stops this gun from the barrel from coming forward when the carrier dog locks into the breech bolt. Now, when it does that, it holds the bolt to the rear, and it lets the barrel come forward. When it does that, the barrel comes forward, and as it comes forward, this ejector on the barrel hooks the empty hull and brings it out the right side of the ejection port. But with just something that makes them, here's our action tube we talked about, the action tube down in the stock. Here's that hole we drilled. See how critical that is. That hole's got to be just right. Something of interest, the Japanese A5s that they made, the Stalker models. They have that plastic fiberglass type stock on it. They had some issues with those breaking off because those plastic stocks were cut out a little too much in the back, and what it did, it let that magazine, this action tube, kind of float around. Well, they would break off. Even the ones that weren't threaded, the ones that are silver soldered, would break off. Pretty common. And but you can see on the Belgium guns here, that hole is bored, so that tube fits pretty tight. That action tube fits pretty tight in the stock, and that's critical that it does that, because if there's got excess play in here and it's you know, got movement in it, then it works on, you know, eventually they'll break off right at the receiver. So the Japanese guns were kind of bad about that. If you buy a new Stalker stock nowadays, you'll see that they have like a plastic liner goes down in around this tube, kind of cradles this action tube, and it really, they're pretty snug. It goes down in there. Now we had ways of cheating to repair that. If we get one in that doesn't have the newer style stock on, it's got the large hole here and it's really floating around, we take spray insulation foam and spray it down in the stock, then we stick the gun down in there. What that does, when we slide the action tube down through that foam, let it set up, it cradles that tube and puts something around that tube to kind of hold it in place where it doesn't bounce around. Because if you don't have this, they break off and are really bad about breaking out. There's one I've repaired a couple times before we finally decided to start reinforcing it. So that's just something of interest there. But yeah, you just have to kind of get one of these cutouts in your hand and kind of work it around a little bit, and you can kind of see how everything kind of cycles and then how everything works. And it's interesting. The A5s are pretty intricate, but they're still very simple. They work very, you know, they're still very reliable. As this bolt comes forward, back at the back here now, you can see your safety sear actually dropping down as I bring that link forward. The back of the link hits that safety sear. That means the gun won't fire. It locks the gun, locks your trigger. There's a reason they call it the safety sear. It locks your trigger to where that gun will not fire until this gun comes all the way forward into battery. Then your safety sear rotates out, that's blocking your trigger, rotates out of the way so the gun will fire. So that's a critical part, and check that safety sear when you're working on these guns. Make sure that it's free and has good movement. It's not bound up or locked up or anything, and that's how that works. So an excellent gun and well made. Just one of my favorite shotguns out there, and like I say, there's over 3 million of them out there. And later on, well, I'll talk a little bit about it now. This is the new style speed load system. These are really nice. You know, you just push that carrier down, and you can load your round into your magazine. I think I put up the one I had. I had the I don't know what I did with that, but I had the one-piece carrier. You can easily change these. You can put a speed load system in. The only thing you really got to remember is when you put that speed load in, you also have to change your locking block latch, which is down in here, that part we took out. When you put the two-piece carrier in, you have to change that locking block latch. That's just kind of part of that modification. That's all you have to do there. And we'll talk a little bit about, in the next video, we're going to do an alteration on a short chambered 16 gauge. And we'll talk about this safety sear and this link and its relationship and some of the modifications you have to make there to stretch everything out and make a longer hull fire in the old short chambered guns. And we'll do a video on that, but that'll give you an idea anyway as to what makes an Auto 5 work. Yep. We're going to try to wrap up our Auto 5 video in this segment. We've got an early 16 that was made back in the early 50s, Sweet 16. And we're going to assemble it, and as we put it back together, we're going to talk about some of the things one needs to inspect and look for. We've talked about it before on occasion, but as we assemble this gun, we're going to check it for springs and cracked or broken parts, and give it a good looking over and checked over, and get it back out in the field. So we'll start zooming in on some parts and put this thing together and see how it comes out. Well, we got our little early Sweet 16 laid out on the bench here, ready for assembly. I've pulled a few parts out so we can inspect them. We've talked about things before. This is an early narrow rail locking block. Whenever you get one of these guns in and you go to put it together, one needs to always pull that out and check it. Of course, now to get it out, you have to remove the firing pin retaining pin here, pull out the firing pin, then rotate this locking block up and out of there. And then check this rail right here. This rail, as we talked about, is a narrow rail. They're the ones that have a tendency to break off. And here is a wider rail. You can see the difference. This is a new style. Browning Company, when they have a bit of a flaw in a gun, they will go back and correct it and beef up parts or whatever it takes to improve on them. So this is the wider rail. This is a narrow rail. And it's still there and it's good, and you know, the theory is around here, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we want to pull it out and inspect it. So now we're going to rotate it back in. We're going to replace the firing pin. Firing pin goes in. And then we will go ahead and put our retaining pin back in place. And try to get things back together. The firing pin went a little tighter than most of them do. Good idea to have a bench block on your bench. It just helps, you know, gives a little something solid to tap pins in. This pin that holds the firing pin in, it's got a flat on it. It has an interruption on it to make it tighter. So it goes in pretty hard, pretty tight. So you need to put it on a bench block when you put it in. Now, also on this gun, I have pulled out the extractors and checked them. This is an old style block, and it has an old style left-hand extractor. They were a little weak, and they had a tendency to break right through this thin area here. So there again, Browning made some improvements, and they came up with a later model extractor. That's a little heavier, a little wider, a little beefier. Let's see if I can find one. I thought I had one here. We have one right here. This is a new style bolt. You can see this is a wider rail, new style bolt. Let's take out this extractor and look at it. Okay, this is the new style extractor. Let me see if I can get it on something where we can see it here. This is the new style. This is the old style. You can see the difference. Now, this newer style is a little heavier, a little beefier, so they don't have a tendency to break. They take a different spring. We're going to continue to use this older style extractor beans. It's good. It's not broke. There again, if it ain't broke, we're not going to fix it. So we just want to pull it out and inspect it. Now, a good idea to replace the springs. So I did that. I've already put a new spring in place. Now, to put those in, these pins come out from the bottom. These pins that hold these extractors in place, they have an interruption on them so that they're so they go in and hold a little tighter. But take them out from the top, drive them down, and when you put them back in, of course, they go in from the bottom, and your flat will be on this side. There again, good idea to have a bench block so you have something a little solid. And go ahead and replace these pins. They go in pretty tight, that's the way you want them. So there we have our left-hand extractor in place. Check it, make sure it's not binding, that it's free and clear, and that it moves. Now, we've already replaced the spring on this right-hand extractor. The right-hand extractor never changed, they were always the same. So we pulled it out and inspected it. Sometimes they get some burrs on them up in this area where they come back into contact with the bolt. We've removed those. That's pretty common for them to have that. Good idea to take those burrs off. You don't want it to bind. Then you put it back in basically the same way, get it lined up, and then tap your pin in from the bottom. And hope you get it the first time. We were lucky on that one, we got it. Tap it in. Make sure your spring's free and clear. Then put it on your bench block and tap it in the rest of the way. Then we check it for freedom of movement. It moves freely. Right-hand extractor is good. Left-hand extractor is good. We've inspected the locking block, the narrow rail. It's the old style, but it's still good. Firing pin is free. Firing pins, they break on occasion. It's pretty rare. Now, to reassemble this gun. This is an early gun. All of our parts that fit in the receiver, our carrier latch, our magazine cutoff, these are all, this is an early gun, so these are held in with screws. Now, the later models use roll pins. All right, we're going to commence to assemble this little 16. Now, this gun has been blued. We've polished the magazine tube. You want those polished very nicely because your friction rings slide on there, and you don't want to get all your gouges and bad stuff out of that tube. So we polished this tube nice and shiny and bright, and got any galling out of it or what have you that might be in it. We have blued this gun. It was fairly rough. We touched up engraving. We replaced the borders that were lost. Engraving's kind of been touched up a little bit. Some of the liner work in the leaves has been done. This is an early gun, and the cartridge stop, the magazine cut off, and all these parts are held in with screws. Now the later models use roll pins. I kind of like the roll pins better. It was an improvement as far as I'm concerned because these screws go in to the receiver and it's a blind hole. On occasion, one of these will rust into place, and they're really tough to get out. Sometimes next to impossible to get them out. Whereas a roll pin, you can always get it out. You can take a roll pin punch, and you can always drive a roll pin straight on through and out. This is a blind hole, so I consider it a bit of an improvement when they went to the roll pins. But this is held in with the screws, and they all came out, so we're going to use them. We're going to go ahead and put our cartridge stop in place first. And it just, I have the spring on it has a little interruption on it, so it'll stick into the cartridge stop a little better. Go ahead and put your pin in. Let's go ahead and put in our carrier latch. Take your button. The button goes in, and then the carrier latch lays in the receiver. Hold it in place and put your screw there. Now, I think we've talked about this, but if this were a roll pin gun, these were held in with roll pins. This carrier latch You gotta make sure when you drive that roll pin in that you hold that carrier latch in at the bottom side of it. Good idea sometimes to hold it in the vise where you can get your finger in there and kind of hold that in, because if you don't, you'll drive that roll pin into that bottom hole on that carrier latch and ruin it. Don't have to worry about that with the screws. Your magazine cutoff goes the same way. Okay, there's all those parts. You need a small jeweler's screwdriver to put these pins, these screws back in, and they just screw right in. There again, sometimes they can be a little difficult to get out. That's the reason I prefer the roll pins. That was an improvement in my opinion. I've had to drill these out on occasion and do different things to get them out, but anyway, they're what they are. It's what it is. This particular one, as I'm assembling it, I have one screw here that doesn't want to go in all the way. If you run into that, take it out, try it somewhere else. It'll probably go somewhere else. Let's try it over here on the carrier latch side, because that screw didn't go down flush enough to suit me. Let's try this over here. We've taken this pin, this screw out. Let's see if it'll go in and go down flush. And it could be maybe some sand in the bottom of the hole or the likes too, which is what it acts like. So we'll address that issue later. Maybe when we sandblasted it, being as that is a blind hole, it might have got a little sand or grit down in the hole. It's keeping that from going in. While I'm at it here, let's just see if we can clear it out. Here's a little drill bit. We're going to walk around a little bit. Got a little bit of junk out there, so that's probably the case. But just to be sure, I'm going to go ahead and pull another screw out here from the cartridge stop and try it, because I want to put this gun together and be done with it. Now to get these out, when you loosen them up, sometimes you just got to kind of take your little screwdriver and hook it on. If they don't come all the way up and out, sometimes you can tap the receiver and they'll fall out. Lift it out. Let's replace that one with this one. And then as we've cleared that hole out a little bit, got some crud out of there, the screw should go in better now. So let's go ahead and put it in. Okay. When you're trying to make a video, things sometimes just don't go right. But this was, that's better. Now that screw went in all the way. Now let's make sure all the rest of them do. That's better. Swap those screws around if you have one that sticks up a little high. Okay, they all went in good now. They're all flush with the side of the receiver. Okay, magazine cutoff spring. We're going to put all the accessories in the side of this receiver. This screw is a little different. These screws are lock screws. These are lock screws that hold, different screws in place. Here is the magazine cutoff screw. It's a dome screw. Has a little spur on the end of it that goes down into the magazine tube and locks the tube in so they don't come out. Magazine tubes are in there really tight anyway. They're not likely to come out anyway, but supposedly that little spur on that screw goes down in the tube and keeps it from backing out. We put that screw in. Now, of course, during assembly, we don't want to burr any screws. Burred screws are a gunsmith's curse. You can burr screws in your Ford as you put it back together, your Chevrolet, but you don't want to do that on gun screws. Now, we're going to put the breech block in place, the breech bolt in place. It slides right in the receiver. Drop the link down out of the way, and then slide in your operating handle. Now we buffed and polished all these parts, and we scrubbed them out good. They're clean. We've ultrasonic the parts. We've inspected them like we talked about on the springs. Now let's go ahead and put our locking block latch in. Now these sometimes should be replaced. Locking block latches wear out on the end. This one doesn't look too bad, so we're going to use it. Here's our locking block latch spring. These sometimes have an area on the spring that's kind of turned in. I'm going to give this one a little bit of one, so that that should go up against the locking block. That way it can't jump around it and cause it to bind. So put that in with the spring in the right position. Put your locking block latch in place. Now you have two pins when you're assembling these guns that look alike. One of them is the pin that holds the locking block latch in, and it will have a flat on it. And this is it here. And this flat is there because it's interrupted, so it'll go in and stay in place. This is the hammer pin. It doesn't have any interruptions on it. It'll slide pretty freely in and out, and that's okay because it can't go anywhere once it gets in the receiver anyway. So this is our locking block latch pin, and we're going to put it in with the interrupted part to the outside here so that it goes in tight. Had a gun in the other day where that pin had worked out and the gun had been fired, and what a mess that thing made. It came back through there and damaged the receiver. So it goes in kind of tight. That's the way we want it. All right, check it, make sure it's free and clear. Excuse me. If this gun had roll pins in it and you drive these roll pins in too far, these pins, if this were a roll pin model, you drive them in too far, they'll hit the bolt. Now you want to get them in deep enough, but you want to check and make sure that they're not going down through the receiver and binding on your bolt. Now this gun, we're going to next put in our action spring. Now we're going to replace this action spring. I don't know if it will show up here well, but this spring is this is the original spring. This is the new spring. This original spring, as you can see, is short, about 1 inch short. So we know that spring's collapsed. So we're going to replace that. You can buy kits out on the internet, and this is one of the replacement springs you put in. Put your follower in place. And this is your action spring plug. This is an old wooden plug. There again, it's working, it's good. The newer plugs are plastic. The wooden ones have a tendency to go bad and rot and that sort of thing. You know, this one's fine. We're going to go ahead and use it. Then push your link down into position and put your action spring in the receiver. And push it down and make sure the follower comes in contact with the link. And then some of this will be out of range of the camera here because I got to kind of get into some different positions. Push this in place, hold it in. You got a small pin here. You have a small pin that holds this action spring plug in place. You can't see the hands are in the way, I know, but like so. And tap that pin in, and that holds the action spring plug in position. So there it is. Now we have a nice new action spring. Got lots of snort to it. You need that. It's important that you have a good action spring in. Same thing, we're going to replace this recoil spring. And you can see it's also collapsed. This is the old spring, this is new. It's this old spring is collapsed. We're going to get rid of that, and then the old action spring, we're going to throw them in the trash can, get them out of the way. But next thing we're going to do is install our carrier. This has got the split carrier. We talked about the old one-piece carriers. This is what they call the speed load system. You can change the old one-piece carriers to the speed load system. It's a nice modification. With the old one-piece carriers, you have to hold the button in to push carrier latch out of the way as you load the gun. With the speed load system, you don't have to do that. It's much nicer. It's kind of pricey to replace the parts. They're about $175 worth of parts to replace the old one-piece. Now, slide your two-piece carrier up in position, and get your carrier screws here. You got 2 holes to line up in there because this is a split system. Get them together. They're lined up now. And put a screw in. They say, well, how do you know which screw goes in which side? Well, you don't. They're not marked. Look at it like this. You got a 50-50 chance of getting it right. And you'll know when you put it in if it's right or not. This one I think is right. It's coming around pretty tight. Sometimes these screws are real loose, sometimes they're tight. This one acts like it's going to index up about perfectly for the lock screw. So I think we got that one right. We'll check it out and see. You don't really know till you put both of them in. Yeah, this is an example here. This one has actually turned past the lock screw cutout a little bit, and that's okay. Doesn't hurt anything. The other side went in fairly tight, but that's the way it is. It doesn't hurt anything because you're going to have a lock screw that holds all that in place. Now, let's lay that aside and let's put together our trigger assembly. We've done this before. This is a cross bolt assembly. The old early suicide safety types with this safety in front of the trigger. This was a big improvement on that. Put your safety in, trigger goes next. So we're still assembling our trigger plate here. Now this is an early gun, has a little different spring system and all. We'll talk about that. Next thing that goes in, and you'll need long needle nose pliers or something, tweezers to get this detent ball, because your fingers just aren't going to fit down in there. You get it down in the hole where it goes, where it belongs. Now, this is an early style trigger safety spring. These spurs on the side here, a couple spurs on the side. Browning doesn't make these anymore. This pin now is held in by a pin. In fact, while I'm talking about that, I have a trigger plate here, a new style trigger plate. You can see a little pin right here. That's holding in this spring. But this spring in this gun does not have these spurs on the side. That's all Browning has anymore. So if you buy a new spring, you're going to have to carefully drill a couple of holes in the back of your trigger plate so you can hold the spring in. I happen to have quite a few of these old style springs. Now, we got our detent ball in place. Now to put this trigger safety spring in, there's some grooves in the trigger plate. You got to get those spurs into those grooves to get it started. So there it is, it's going forward, and push it forward. If you can't get it all the way with your fingers, get up close to the position and tap it into place, making sure that your detent ball doesn't jump out on you. You can check that. You can see the detent ball still in place. Now we're going to line up we have a hole in this spring, and the main spring goes in next, slides in like this, goes in, your main spring screw goes up through that trigger plate, that trigger spring, like so. Then we put our mainspring screw in. I've been told, I've never personally seen it, but down at Browning they told me that the reason sometimes a Browning Auto 5 will go full auto on you is if this screw here is loose. So I'm putting it in very tight. They say if that screw loosens up, they'll go full auto. I don't know, I've never seen one do that, but they claim that's the case. Now, next thing goes in is our hammer. Now this is the old style hammer with a roll on it. Browning stopped putting that roller on, that hammer. I don't have one here in front of me. Anyway, they removed this roller and there's just a spur on that hammer. Well, it's all fine and good, but what we found is that when this roll pin's not here, the spur on this hammer, where it comes into contact with the mainspring right here, has a tendency to gall. And sometimes that gun, when the hammer retracts down, is down, locked down, it'll stay that way because it's galled. And I've seen that many times. Hammer retaining pins in place. Now, what I'm talking about is when this gun is cocked, if you don't have that roller on there, the ones that have just a spur, I've seen them get down into a position like this, and it has gall on the mainspring where that spur comes in contact with it. And so you have to polish that mainspring off and polish the spur on the hammer. Now, with the roller, you don't have that problem. That's not going to happen. Next thing you do is put in your safety sear. This is your safety sear spring and plunger. This gun has been blued. Important that if you blue these guns to blow out all the bluing salts and all out of this hole. Otherwise, they'll creep up in there and lock up your safety sear, and that could be kind of a dangerous situation. Slide your safety sear in, push your spring and plunger down, slide in. Now, this is an old style trigger plate. Here's a new style. I brought one out to show you. The new style actually has the carrier spring that sits in the trigger plate assembly. Actually sits in position like that. This one doesn't do that. This one, the carrier spring mounts in the frame itself, and there's a couple pins in here, and you have to put it on the roll, put it on the rear pin, swing it down on top of the carrier, and then push in the top part. Put it in position like so, and then push it down in and get it under the front pin, and pop it in like this. There, make sure it goes up against the wall of the receiver. There, this is the old style carrier spring. New style receivers don't have these two pins in the side of the receiver. I don't know that it was really an improvement when they went to this new style. I think it was just kind of a machining thing, and then a little less money to put pins in the side of that receiver. They both work fine. I've never seen any real problems with either one, so I can't tell you one's any better than the other. Now, let me step up here and grab one. Now, you need a little oil on some parts here, and I like motor oil. I need a little bit on that action spring. I want a little bit on that carrier spring where it comes into contact with the carrier. I want a little bit on the carrier dog plunger, like so. Not much. You don't want a bunch of oil in there. And when you put that carrier in, push your button down, make sure everything's free and clear, that it will retract all the way back up. Sometimes you need to replace these carrier springs that get weak. Now, if you go to Browning to get a new spring, they don't have this old style spring. All they have are these new styles. But they still work. You just take the new style spring, put it on the back pin, rotate it down, then when you put your trigger plate in position, it'll all come together for you. So the new style spring will work in an old style gun. All right, we're going to put our trigger plate in our receiver now. Now you always put the trigger plate in at the front. Put the front of the trigger plate in like so. And then take the smaller pin, trigger plate pin, it goes in the front, and put it in position. Get your trigger plate in there. Line up the hole, put it in. It should pop right in. This one's sticking for some reason. Shouldn't have to take a mallet or anything to tap it in place, but I don't know, that's got a burr on or something. It's going in tight. It shouldn't go in that tight. Anyway, now, you cannot at this point just push this trigger plate up in position. It's not going up in the position where it belongs because it's hitting on the carrier spring in there. So what you have to do is bring your bolt back just about 1/4 inch or so, and it clears it, and then it drops into position. Now, put in your rear trigger plate screw. All right. Now you might want to check everything when you get to that point. Make sure everything's free and clear, everything works before you put in your screws all the way. You notice I haven't put in any of my lock screws yet. I don't do that till last because I don't know, maybe something just won't be the way I like it, and then I've got to take out all the lock screws. But I'm going to go ahead and put these trigger plate screws in, index them up where they belong, and these usually go in pretty easy. I don't know, this front one for some reason it's kind of tight. I think it's just got a burr on it, but it's going. Index it up correctly. Now, I still don't have my lock screws in place. I'll do that last. Lock screws go here. But now I'm gonna cycle that receiver. I'm gonna make sure everything is free and clear. Everything works the way it should. Check your safety. Make sure the hammer drops. Everything works. So we're good to go. Now I can continue and put in all my lock screws. Down at Browning they had little special plates they screwed these lock screws into when they glued the small parts. It was a plate they made up down there that held all the screws to the A5. I never used those things. I never really could see where they were really that necessary. When I'm bluing A5 screws, I blew them, throw them in a basket. That's what we do. So we're going to go ahead now and put in our lock screws. As we've talked about before, important that you have the right screwdrivers for assembling A5. You don't want any bird screws anywhere. If you have a gun that has really badly burred screws and you can't polish the burrs off the screws, you need to replace them. I've got the screws, Browning's got the screws. Now, if you buy new trigger plate screws or carrier screws from Browning, they won't have the notch cut in them for this lock screw. So you have to take a rat tail file and put them and cut your own notch in them. So we're putting in our lock screws. There's the last one going in. Snug them down. If you got the right screwdriver, when you put that gun together, you won't have any bird screws. You don't want bird screws. This receiver's really looking good. Since we touched up all the engraving, put it back on, put a deep gold plate on the trigger. The metal on this gun is now ready to go. The wood is being finished on this gun, so we're not going to put it on just at this point. I'm going to put my stock retaining screw just in place here, just kind of have it there, so when my wood does get done, I'll be able to just take this screw out and then just slip on the wood and the gun will be good to go. So that's a few things to watch for when you're doing an Auto 5, when you're putting one back together. We talked about that. Now I haven't put in the magazine spring yet. Let's do that. Here's your follower. Put that in. So these magazine tubes are crimped quite often. So maybe when you're putting that follower in, it may not just drop in, so you can't just take a rawhide now and tap it in place. Good idea to replace this magazine's spring. We've already put a new one here in place. Now see what we have in the way of a retainer. I don't see it laying here. Here it is. This is the old style retainer. It's metal, has a slot cut in it. Let's see if I can keep in the camera here and put this in. The way you put these in, the new ones are plastic. The new ones, you would put the plastic in, put your plug on top. The old style ones, the way they work is you put your 3-shot adapter in first, and then put your magazine spring retainer in. When you do that, you put the slot in and cock it down, kind of like thus. You take a hammer and tap it at the back, and with a little luck, it'll pop in there where it belongs. That one's trying to go, but it's causing me a little grief. Let's take it out and try it again. It doesn't go the first time, just try it again. So let's take it again, put the slot in, rotate it down, and then tap it at the rear. See if it'll go. That one doesn't want to go, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to try it one more time. And if that doesn't do it, I'm going to take a specialty tool I have and I'm going to remove some of that crimp. There, we got it that time. My specialty tool is an old gun barrel that's tapered. I tap it in and it lifts the crimp out. Now if you do that and you get your retainer in, then you kind of need to go around and tap around and kind of crimp it back down on that so things stay in place. This is our new recoil spring. Slide it on. When I do these guns, I always set them for the heavy loads. That's just, when you get one back from me, it'll be set for heavy loads. Remember your bronze piece and your friction ring goes bevel up. Your bronze ring the same way, bevel up. Good idea sometimes to take a little emery cloth in there and kind of polish out these, get rid of some of the burrs that might be on this bronze piece. Scrub it up good, get all the crud out of it, put your bronze piece on. Then we're just going to put our magazine cap on. Now this cap, they've had a wrench on channel locks or vice grips on it. It's damaged a little. Boy, I mean, that's just a common thing. There again, you don't have to torque these caps down real tight when you put these guns on. They think that maybe their forearms are cracking because the cap is not on tight, the forearm's loose. That's not the case. Just put them on snug them down, finger tight, and they're good. Don't be putting a wrench on them. That's what's happened here. These guys put wrenches on them, torque them down really tight. Well, it just does the job on the serrations on the magazine cap. So oftentimes these have to be replaced. The new Japanese caps have an extra ring of serrations on it. I like them better. You can get a hold of them better. They work better for me. A lot of guys don't like them because it's Japanese. They want the old style with the two on it. Anyway, this receiver, this gun is assembled. It's now ready for the wood. It's been checked over and been rebuilt with new springs. That gun will give years and years of good service. It's worth a lot of money now, and in years to come, they're going to just keep increasing in price. They're going to always be worth more money. One of the best investments out there is a Browning Auto 5. Buy them, it's like money in the bank. Well, just as I was wrapping up that video, finishing going through the assembly work on this old Sweet 16, the wood guys happened to walk through the door and handed me the wood that they got done. And I've just installed this stock. I want to tell you a little something about putting a stock back on an A5. We talked about in past videos about how they get loose when we tighten them. We've been through all that. This particular one I don't think was ever loose. They don't all get that way, just some. But this stock they refinished down in our wood section the other day. Just a beautiful set of wood. Beautiful set of wood. This is all factory. I didn't replace this wood. This just happens to be a Browning Sweet 16 that has just some real killer fiddleback in the wood. They don't all have that. Most of them are pretty bland and plain Jane, but this is a good one. Go through our website and click on the Guns International link, and you'll see this gun on the internet next week. You guys are going to have to go easy on each other. Everybody's going to want it. It's going to go for quite a bit of money, but that's the way guns are that have nice figure in them. They're just a real cherished item. People love beautiful figure in wood, and I got to admit I'm a sucker for it myself. Now, when I put this stock on, we talked about this. These two this big screw here. This is your stock retaining screw. That's when that's out of the gun, and you go to put this wood on the receiver. You need to tap that stock up on, because they usually don't just slide up into place, and you'll have to put it on the bench and tap it on the heel of the stock here, like that, and that'll drive that wood up onto that receiver. What you never ever want to do is tap on the toe of the stock. That's very weak, and toes break on stocks all the time. So when you tap that wood into place, make sure you hit it on the heel of the stock back here. Drive it on, then you can go put your retaining screw in and your lock screw. Now the form, there's not much to talk about on putting the form back on, but I'll show you a couple things. You always want to have a drop or two of regular old motor oil under that bronze piece. Spin the spring. You put your barrel on. When I'm thumping stocks on, I like to have my magazine cap on, because when I'm driving that stock on, sometimes the jarring of it pops out the magazine spring retainer and it shoots across the shop, so I make sure the cap's on. Now, we all know how to put a barrel on the A5. Slides on into the receiver. Now, it's going to be kind of awkward in the video here. Maybe we're going to do what we can. Then you got to overcome this recoil spring. Get it to where it goes into the receiver. Line things up, and then slide your form on. Slide the form on, and then put your cap on. Now, this form, and sometimes they do this, especially after finishing, the form won't go on all the way, and you'll screw the cap down a little bit, and you'll have a gap here where it hasn't screwed down on against the receiver like it should. So you need to bring it up, kind of pull that spring down, and then pop that form on the bottom. Sometimes just give it a little pop like that, and that'll jump this ring of wood into the receiver. Then you can tighten it down. You can snug down your cap. Now this cap, for some reason, I still have a little bit of a gap in the wood here. Sometimes they get finish in here. Now, I have ways of kind of doing that. You can, try to tighten down by hand. If it doesn't go, I have these special pliers here. And when I say put pliers on your gun, you got to have the right pliers. I happen to have the right ones, and we've talked about these, and I'll show you. I'm going to kind of force that wood down there a little bit to kind of clear out all the finish that's on it. Now that form has gone down in the position where it should be. when I kind of force things down on like this, is kind of getting rid of the finish and all that might be in there. So here, I just hit the. We talked about these pliers before. This is just a pair of vice grips, and we have leather inserts we glued up into place here. We get the concave shaped vice grips, and you glue that in. That's the way you want to take your caps off and put them on. Now I have got this cap now to where I can take it on and off with my fingers, and that's the way you want it. And when I screw it down finger tight, it now goes down and butts up against the receiver where it should be. Make yourself a set of these pliers. Don't go use channel locks on it. Don't put pliers on those magazine caps. It just ruins them. This one, we have blued this gun. I can still see a little damage on this magazine cap where someone's been on it with some channel locks or something. It's not too noticeable because we blued it and straightened it up. But that's really basically all you have to do to put wood on these guns. But this gun is now ready to go out on the internet. It's been completely rebuilt, all new springs, engraving touched up. It looks like a new gun, trigger gold plated, and all the bolt and the carrier and all have been buffed and polished. The gun is thoroughly clean and ready to go. The wood's been finished. This gun will give years of good service. It'll be something you'll be proud to own. You can hand it down to children and grandchildren. It'll increase in value. It's not like a lot of the new modern guns. They're just basically shooters. They're not really hand-me-downs. These are. So that kind of wraps up things on our Auto 5 series, and we'll take this gun out here in just a minute and go shoot it, just make sure it does work. So anyway, we're going to test fire this A5. We've got I like to feed my rounds in from the bottom. I can tell you, if it's going to work, it'll probably work for sure. If it feeds that up in that chamber nice and neat, yeah, that looks good the way it feeds that up in there. Now, these rounds that I'm test firing with here today are fairly heavy loads. I have set it for heavy loads. And I'm going to test fire it and see. Now, if it doesn't cycle with the heavier loads, well, then we'll change the rings. But I always recommend setting your A5 for heavy loads. It cuts down on the recoil. And if the gun shoots set on the heavy load setting, then that's good. That's the way you want it. So let's shoot it and see what it does. That's a prime example right there. As you can see, that gun did not cycle. Here's the empty right here. Didn't cycle. That's not a big deal. Now we know that this ammo we're using just doesn't quite have enough snort to make that gun work. So we're going to stop and we're going to set this on lighter loads and we'll test fire it and it'll work that way. But always start with the heavy loads. Leave it set for heavy loads. So I came out and loaded this A5. I had it set for the heavy loads. I test fired it. It didn't work. As you can see, it just didn't cycle. Not a big deal. We'll set it on the light loads, which is easy enough to do. Take the cap off. Hold on. I have my son Nicholas stand here next year. He's just kind of somebody here to kind of hold things so I can do things. Pull off this bronze piece and the metal friction ring. But the reason this gun doesn't cycle is because these rounds I'm shooting don't quite have enough snort to make it work. But yeah. But another reason we put this new spring in. And sometimes you put a new spring in. Down at Browning, one of the gunsmiths kept a box of used springs, and if he had a gun that wouldn't cycle with a new spring, he'd slip in a used spring. It was a little weaker and they cycle. We can probably make this one cycle by just setting it up for light loads. We talked about this before. You take your metal ring, drop it bevel down, drop it down at the bottom. There again, you can put it in your pocket if you want to lose it, but this is just storage area down here. Let's put on our new spring. Let's put our bronze piece back on, bevels up. Let's put our barrel back on. And I'll bet it'll work this time. If not, we'd go to a little weaker spring, but it should work. It's the ammo mostly. It just didn't have quite enough snort to it to make the gun cycle with that new spring. But I can tell you the recoil was very mild because I had to replace that recoil and action spring. When you have good new springs in these guns, they're very mild on recoil. Just tighten these down finger tight. You don't need pliers. You don't need to torque them down. Pop them at the back a little bit here and tighten them down. Now, let me try it again. The gun's now been changed over and it's set for light loads. And I'm just betting money this gun will work this time. Here again, safety on. I like to feed them in through the bottom. That kind of checks things, make sure it's feeding right. This gun feeds good, doesn't have any mechanical issues there. And we'll shoot it again. Set on light load and see what happens. It works. That gun right now is ready to go. If you were to shoot a little heavier load in there, you might have to go back and set it for heavy loads. These loads I shot weren't real, they were kind of an intermediate range. They weren't real heavy, they weren't real light. But that gun cycled perfectly. Very mild on the recoil because I got all the new springs in it. That's a fine gun right there. Well, I enjoyed making this video for you guys and gals out there. It's always a pleasure to deal with a shooting fraternity. I love firearms. It's been part of my life for a good many years. I love the outdoors. I love hunting. And I'm not a very good trap or skeet shooter, and when it comes to clay targets, I'm just not very good at it. In fact, I'm not really a good shot when it comes to pheasant or anything else, but I love the sport. So I hope you enjoyed the video. We enjoyed making it for you. We've got some more coming up in the future. We're getting ready to do a baby 25 pistol. It's going to be interesting. Very small, intricate little gun. That I think you'll find it interesting what you got to do to take one apart and put it back together. And one of my favorites is coming up. We have a Browning Trombone 22 pump rifle. One of my favorites. We got a rough one that's come in the shop, and we're going to restore that and make that gun like new because they're hot sellers. I can't keep them in stock. They're wonderful little guns. So more videos on the way, and hope you enjoyed what we've done so far, and we'll get some more coming your way.